Hi everybody, Captain Al speaking with your time training tips and 10 ticks targeted to teaching technical type transport travel through tailored tiny takeaways. The question for today, episode 7, how can I judge a close-in tight restriction and whether I can make it or not in the Boeing 747-400 and Boeing 747-8? Okay, we're in the virtual simulator to answer the question for today. How can I judge a close-in tight restriction and whether I can make it or not? This is a question that was posed by a Scarebus driver, good name, and he wanted to know if you have I think the example I used when I was doing the VNAV climb page timed tutorial. I had an at or below restriction in there, and he wanted to know, well, what if it was an at or above restriction and it was close in? How can you evaluate whether you can make that or not? And the example he cited or he used was if, let's say, it was 3,000 feet at 5 nautical miles away. So this is the routing that we had from Seattle to Anchorage on that line flight that I just did. And instead of, we have the Bangor 8 departure in there, we're climbing to 12,000, departing runway 34 right. And if you look on the legs page, we have a 344 heading till passing 940. Then we go to Dodvie, and then to Whirl, and we're crossing Whirl at or above 3,100 feet. But that's 7 miles away, so we're going to have no problem doing that. But what he was asking is, what if you have something that's like 5 miles away? So instead of a Whirl, let's put in a restriction at Dodvie. So we'll delete the 3,100 at Whirl. And then at Dodvie, we'll put in a restriction of 3,000, which is close to what he was asking, 3,000, and instead of 5 miles, it's 4 miles. And we'll execute that, and then we'll go to the VNAV page, and we're looking in this area right here, and we're looking in this area right here, and we're looking at the message light and to see if there's any error message that comes up, and of course you get an ICAS message as well. So the computer right now is evaluating it. Right now it's saying we're going to make that, but it's thinking about it. And now you can see it comes up with the unable next altitude. You get an FMC ICAS message advisory, and you get the at Dodvie at 3,000, it would be 1040 low and 3 miles long. So that means that instead of crossing Dodvie at 3,000, we're going to cross it around 2,000. And where we will cross 3,000 feet would be 3 miles beyond Dodvie. So right now the computer is saying you're not going to make that. Now, what can we do about that? Well, we can advise ATC that we can't make that, and then he would say, okay, well, do your best. Or he's going to give us some alternative instructions if we can't make that. So we could always advise him we can't make that. But let's say we wanted to try to accommodate him. There's a couple things we could do. One of the things we could do is we could check to see, well, what are we using for our acceleration height and our thrust reduction point? So if you go to the takeoff reference page, you'll see in this case we're using NADP2. If you don't know what that is, you can check out one of my videos on I think it was thrust limits, I believe. And that's a 1,000-foot acceleration height with a flap 5 thrust reduction. Well, instead of NADP2, let's do NADP1, which is the noise abatement profile. And we could put in 3,000 feet. Instead of accelerating or starting the acceleration at 1,000 feet, what if we continue the climb to 3,000 feet before we accelerate? That should help us certainly in trying to make that. So we could put that 3,000 feet in, and we could change our thrust reduction to 1,500 feet for the NADP1. And how's that going to change now? Is it going to change at all? Well, we see, yeah, it did change a lot. It changed from that error that we had to now that we're going to be nothing long and 210 feet low. So that should help immensely. It's still predicting we're not going to quite make it. But one thing we could do is the acceleration height is 3,000 above the field. At Seattle, the field elevation is around 340, so around 3340 it will start to accelerate. But what we could do is the window's going to blank when we get airborne and we get into VNAV at 400 feet. We could open the window, reset the speed to V2 plus 10. It's going to settle wherever we settle with a rotation rate. So let's say we're at V2 plus 15. Remember, it can vary anywhere from V2 plus 10 to V2 plus 25 depending on your rotation rate. So if you go ahead and open the window and then dial the speed back to V2 plus 10, which would be 168, then and we keep that, that's going to probably more than make up the difference here to make this restriction. So that's what we're going to do in this case. Some other things you could consider would be taking out TO1 and going to full TO if the error were greater. You could maybe consider changing flaps from flaps 10 to flap 20. You wouldn't want to just arbitrarily change the performance though without having the proper performance charts. Remember, your performance is predicated on your current weight and what dispatch is given you in terms of, or what you figured out in terms of an OPT, an onboard performance tool, or your dispatch papers, or however you figure out your performance. That has been given to you, and you don't want to just arbitrarily change it in an effort to make a restriction if you don't know what that's going to do for you for that runway. Another thing you could consider is when you get airborne, if we suspected that this error were more, we could, once we're airborne, push TOGA a second time and get rid of TO1 and go to full TO. What that would do is it would automatically change you from climb 1 to full climb. Another thing you could consider is taking off in TO1, not changing the TO1 thrust, but maybe going from climb 1 to climb. That's going to give you a little more oomph to get up. So you could consider either one of those things, taking out the TO1 and going to full TO, doing it when you're airborne, or actually having your pilot monitoring come here and change you from climb 1 to climb if you kept TO1. All those would have an effort of enabling you to try to make that restriction, but we're not going to change anything here because it's close enough to we don't have to necessarily worry about it. What we'll do also is put in a restriction here at Atomi. Right now Atomi is predicted at 4,900, and we're going to put in a restriction of 9,000, so we'll put that in. Something that's going to have difficulty making, and then we'll execute that. And so we'll see if this generates an unable next altitude message, and maybe something we could do to try to make that restriction. So with that, let's go to the let's go back to the VNAV page so we can watch that, and we'll go ahead and take off. Okay, we're ready for takeoff, and I've changed the restriction instead of because this was his question. Instead of 3,000 at 3,000 feet, I've changed it to 3,000 A, at or above 3,000. Really doesn't change this number at all, the error message. So we'll clear that message in the scratch pad, and we'll release the parking brake. We'll set 70% N1 and stabilize. Push TOGA, set takeoff thrust.
Power set. knots.
Check.
V1. Rotate.
It's a positive rate. We'll get the gear up.
Positive climb. Gear up.
Okay, we'll engage the autopilot. And we'll open the window. And we'll bring the speed back to 168, which is V2 plus 10. And we'll start to evaluate how we're going to do to .v. And notice the message went away. There's no error predicted right now. We're keeping V2 plus 10, and we're going to keep that until we cross Dodvi. We're 1.4 miles from Dodvi. You notice we've gone to climb thrust. You could, again, if you chose to, you could go to the, have your pilot monitoring, go to the thrust limit page, and you could change from climb 1 to climb if there was still some error here. But right now we're doing fine. 0.5 miles away, we're at 2,800 feet. Here comes 3,000 feet, and we made Dodvi by 3,000. Next altitude is 9,000 at Atomi. So we'll go ahead and close the window now, and we'll start to accelerate at our 3,000 above the field, which we're doing now. And this will probably generate the error message again, because we're going to start the nose is going to lower. We're going to accelerate for flap retraction. We're going to retract flaps. And because of this, our climb rate is going to become less. And to make Atomi at 9,000, it's probably going to have a problem. So we'll go flaps 5. And you notice we have the message now, unable next altitude. FMC message, we're 760 low and 1 mile long. So it is predicting an error there. So what can we do in this case? Well, let's retract let's go to flaps 1.
Flaps 1.
But then what we're going to do is open the window, bring back the speed, and let's try to make that restriction by keeping our flaps 1 speed and keeping our speed maybe back down to our flap 1 speed of 212 and try to make that restriction.
Flaps 1.
So notice the error message went away now again because we stopped our acceleration, and we're going to keep flaps 1 for a little bit to try to make that. We've got 2 miles to make it. The computer's still predicting we can do it. Again, you could take out this climb 1 and go to full climb if that'd be another option. If we can't make it, we'd advise ATC, that's all. Right now we're 1 mile and looks like we're going to have no problem making that. So we're coming up on 9,000, just passing Atomi. And maybe slightly low, but not enough to get all upset about. And we'll go ahead and close the window and start to accelerate. And once we get to the flap up bug, then we'll go flaps up. Let's go flaps up.
Flaps up.
And those are some of the ways that you can assist in determining whether you can make a tight restriction or not. Hope that helps. Thanks for watching.